George Lyon, Liberal Democrats MEP for Scotland. This resolution really comes after another hike in food prices in January.
Yes, we now see food prices at the highest level they've been in many a long year, and that's the second major price spike in food. And of course it's causing problems worldwide. We see the riots in Egypt. A lot of it's linked into the high cost of food and hunger and poverty that's created by that. So there's a wake-up call, I think, here for politicians. For too long they've taken it for granted that food would be cheap, it would be plentiful, that 24 hours a day our supermarket shelves would be groaning with cheap food. I think these days are coming to a close. We need to address some of the fundamental issues such as food wastage. We waste 30% of the food produced, which is an outrage, either in people's fridges or in waste at the processing side or in supermarket waste as well. So we need to look closely at that. We also need to look closely at the current model of agriculture. Up until now it's been based on cheap energy, plentiful water supplies, plentiful land. That's not going to meet the huge global demand that's going to arise in the future, and we need to look at how we develop a food production system that's less reliant on fossil fuel and energy.
I mean, when it comes to looking at the UK and your constituency in Scotland in particular, I mean, is that something that applies in Scotland? Do they need to be looking at a different model that uses perhaps less of those kind of inputs, the energy, the water?
Yeah, they do, because at the moment, maybe not water, but certainly energy, all our inputs have risen dramatically because of the high price of oil. The price of oil is up $100 a barrel. Every input, whether it's fertiliser, whether it's sprays, herbicides, tractor diesel, have all rocketed in price as well. So although we're getting benefits from the higher prices, farmers are getting benefits from higher prices, they're actually not making a huge amount of extra money. So we need to find better ways to utilise the inputs that go into our food production system if we're going to ensure that consumers in future can enjoy reasonable prices and good quality food produced at a level that they can afford.
And how big then is the change that Scottish farmers, UK farmers would need to make? And would they need help to do it, to know how to do it?
Well, I think we need to look closely at the inputs we use. We need to look at how we use them better. But we also need to develop new technologies that can help us produce more with less. And at the moment, we don't have them. They don't exist. And therefore, we do need to look closely and to carry out investment in R&D to come up with these new solutions. But it would help right away if we could reduce the waste in the system. That in itself would make a big difference as well. And of course it's not European consumers who are hit hardest by high food prices, it's those in developed countries where 80% of their incomes are spent in food. You get a doubling in price inside 12 months. That's a huge blow to these people. It creates poverty around the world and hunger as well. So we need to tackle it, and Europe has a responsibility, I believe, to lead the fight in developing a more sustainable form of agriculture.
And when it comes to waste in the fridges of the public, is that just about public information, do you think? Do you think there needs to be campaigns? How do we tackle that?
Well, it's very difficult because partly it's due to lifestyle. Now, I'm guilty of that as well. When you're on the move and you buy produce in and you leave it in the fridge and then it's up by its sell-by date. So I think it's a bit better management and it's a bit better education, and that clearly has to happen. But there's a big role that supermarkets can play as well, and retailers. Huge amounts of waste in the retail side as well, and indeed in the processing side. I was visiting a potato farmer the other day, and he was estimating that 30% of the potatoes actually end up wasted by the time he digs them to actually are in the shops and used by consumers. So there's obviously ways to tighten up there where we can reduce the amount of waste that we have of food, and that's a big step that you can make right away.
You mentioned that farmers perhaps are getting more for what they grow, but is there still more that needs to be done in the supply chain? I mean, presumably the increase in food prices at the checkout is not matched fully by what farmers are getting sort of at the farm gate.
Yeah, that's one of the other major blockages in the system. Although food prices have been rising, and indeed it's contributing to the big rise in inflation in the UK, a lot of that price rise is not feeding back down the chain, especially in the milk industry, where milk producers are receiving still a very low price, despite the fact that we've seen price rises occur right right round the commodities. So there is a need to find ways to strengthen farmers' ability to negotiate a better price in the market, and that's fundamental. That's been part of the CAP reform debate, and it's also been part of the work that the Commission's been doing and how you introduce a more greater transparency into the food chain and ensure that those who are the weakest in it, which tend to be farmers who are individuals and it's against big multinational retailers, how we can actually give them more power to be able to win a better market return. That's very, very important as well.
So this resolution highlighting the issues, calling for action really, what kind of weight can it have? What can come from this resolution?
Well, I think what it does is it puts the whole issue of food production and agriculture back on the top of the political agenda. Because there's real concern worldwide about what we do about this. There's action at a European level and at a world level to try and tackle some of the speculation issues, the role of speculators in driving these prices upwards, and whether there needs to be greater regulation there. So that's one of the issues. But this has now become a big issue, and it means there'll be a greater political focus in finding solutions, and that has to be welcomed.